In this video, I'm going to use Metalogic's Essentials for Office 365 to create a backup of users' OneDrives hosted in Office 365. So in order to do this, firstly I must launch the software, and then I click on the Backup tab, and then I can click either to Local or to Cloud Storage Backup, either of these buttons. So the first thing I need to do now is give the project a name. Now the project name will appear on the right here. There's an existing project, the Finance Backup, and all backups created within this project will appear under there. So I'm going to call this OneDrive Backup. So next I need to choose the service. So because we're backing up OneDrives, we drop down to here and choose OneDrive for Business. Next, I need to enter the admin credentials. Now, in order to create the backup in this manner, you need to be a global admin. So I'll enter those credentials here. And click Connect. And enter the password. And now I'm successfully connected. So next I need to choose the scope of the backup. So I have two options here. I can include all OneDrives, or I can specify a set number. Now, if I include all OneDrives, that creates what's called a dynamic backup. So if you set this as a recurring backup, and in a month's time 5 more people have joined the organization and have OneDrives, they will now be included. So it kind of grows and shrinks with your tenant. If you choose to specify OneDrives, then you create a fixed list and it will only ever back up those. So for this example, I'm going to choose to specify a OneDrive. So I can either load these from an existing CSV or have the program create the CSV for me. So I'm going to click Select from Office 365. So for this example, I'm going to back up Adele's OneDrive, Alex's OneDrive, and also Alan's OneDrive. So when I click OK, it's going to prompt me to save a CSV. So I'm going to save that here, and I'm going to call it OneDrive Backup CSV, and I'll just put 001 on the end. Click Save. So now that's loaded and it says you selected 3 users. So the final sections here are where we choose what we intend to back up. So from here we can choose whether to back up permissions, content, versions, all versions, or just a set number of versions. Again, we've got the option here to delete from the source. That is grayed out by default. There is an option to ungray that out, but for a typical backup you wouldn't intend to delete the content from the source. We can apply filters, so we can filter out certain types of content based on perhaps their file extension or the size of the documents. We can configure a notification to send to someone when the backup has taken place, and we can also include non-licensed users. The retention policy determines how long the backup will be kept before it's automatically deleted by the software. By default, these options are unchecked, but you can check them so to keep, for example, full backups for 60 days and incremental backups for maybe 14 days. The final option down here are the backup locations. So there are essentially 4 locations we can create this backup. The first is on our local disk, so the disk the software is installed on. We can also point that to a UNC path, so to perhaps a remote disk, and there are 2 cloud options. So the cloud options available are Amazon S3 and Microsoft Azure. Azure, for example, you need an Azure tenant. Within the tenant, you sign in and create a blob storage container. That will then provision a name and a key. You enter those in here, and then you can back up to Azure storage. So for today's example, we're just going to back up to my local disk. The remaining options we have here, we've got the option to generate a script. That will generate a command line script for the job, so you can run it from a command line outside of the tool, and you can also schedule this job to take place. So the first time you create any backup, you can only schedule it to happen once only. Once the backup job has been created, you can then schedule recurring backups, such as recurring full or recurring incremental. So let me just check our options. So we're going to include content, include versions, and we're saving to our local disk. So I'm just going to click Finish and kick off that backup. So as a backup progresses, you can view the details, and it shows each time an item is backed up. And this will be captured in the log when the backup is complete, and then we can review each individual step to see how successful it's been. So when the backup completes, we receive a summary noting that 141 items were processed successfully, and from here we can view the log. So the log will show you each item that was backed up and whether it was backed up successfully or not. You can double click on each item to learn more about it. So for example, this was their holiday marketing spreadsheet. From here, if we click select all, we can save this log as a CSV to do some analysis perhaps in Excel, or save as an XML. So you'll notice on the right now in the backup navigator, a new project has appeared called OneDrive Backup. And if I drill down into that, you see we've a clock icon with a date and time the last backup was created and the nature of the backup. So it says there in brackets, full backup. And so I drill down into that, you see we've got individual sections for each user that was backed up and each of their lists and libraries. So now that we've created the backup, we can now schedule a recurring backup by right-clicking on the project and choosing update. So from here we can choose to do a full update recurring on a schedule, or an incremental update recurring on a schedule, or indeed a differential which will back up everything since the last full update. So we choose which option is required using the radio buttons, then we click schedule, and from here we can choose to create the recurring backups. And this will create a task in Windows Task Scheduler and initiate the backup on that schedule, perhaps once a week or once a month. So now that the backup has been created, I can drill down into it and see the contents. So things we can do straight away from here, we can right click and choose open, and that will open the document on my current machine so I can view the contents, see if that's what I potentially wish to restore. I can also right click on the document and choose restore, and that will restore it to the OneDrive it was from. And we can choose here to include all versions, a set number of versions. We can defer required fields, which will restore the document even if there are columns in the source which it doesn't have data for, and we can choose whether or not to restore permissions. Interestingly, here we can also copy that document and paste it elsewhere within the tenant. So perhaps we could paste it into a team site, maybe into the finance team documents. You can paste it into there. So you can do this for individual documents or groups of documents, and you can also do it for folders that exist within there. At a library level, we can also choose to restore the library. So that is how to back up OneDrives using MetaLogic's Essentials for Office 365.